Japanese calligraphy is a form of calligraphy, or artistic writing, of the Japanese language. For a long time, the most esteemed calligrapher in Japan had been Wang Xizhi, a Chinese calligrapher in the 4th century, but after the invention of Hiragana and Katakana, the Japanese unique syllabaries, the distinctive Japanese writing system developed and calligraphers produced styles intrinsic to Japan. Techniques. Early Japanese calligraphy was originated from Chinese calligraphy, and many of its principles and techniques are very similar and recognizes the same basic writing styles: seal script, clerical script, regular script, semi-cursive, cursive. Tools. In modern calligraphy, a number of tools are used to make a composition. See the 4 treasures. Traditionally, these tools are an inkstick. The older the inkstick is, the better it is. The best inksticks are between 50 and 100 years old. Mulberry paper, an inkstone to grind the inkstick against, mixed with water. A paper weight to hold the paper in place, a cloth to place under the paper to prevent ink from bleeding through. A brush, a seal. The art of engraving a seal is called tenkoku-sie. The student is encouraged to engrave his own seal. The position of the seal or the seals is based on aesthetic views. One is not allowed to put a seal on a sutra's calligraphy. During preparation, water is poured into the inkstone and the inkstick is ground against it, mixing the water with the dried ink to liquefy it. As this is a time-consuming process, modern-day calligraphy provides liquid ink in a bottle called bokuju and is frequently used by beginners. More advanced students are encouraged to grind their own ink. The traditional and best position for calligraphy is on the ground. The brushes come in various shapes and sizes, and are usually made using animal hair for the bristles. Typical animal hair may come from goats, sheep, horsehair, etc. The handle may be made from wood, bamboo, plastic or other materials. History. Chinese roots. The Chinese roots of Japanese calligraphy go back to the 28th century BC, to a time when pictographs were inscribed on bone for religious purposes. When this writing developed into an instrument of administration for the state, the need for a uniform script was felt, and Li Si, prime minister in the Chinese dynasty of Qin, standardized a script and its way of being written. He sanctioned a form of script based on squares of uniform size into which all characters could be written from 8 strokes. He also devised rules of composition where horizontal strokes are written first and characters are composed starting from top to bottom, left to right. Because the symbols were inscribed with sharp instruments, the lines were originally angular, and in many ways Li Si's achievements were made obsolete by the appearance of brush and ink. The inkwet brush creates a line quite different from a sharp stylus. It affords variation in thickness and curve of line. Calligraphy retained the block form of Li Si in his 8 strokes, but the writer was free to create characters that emphasized aesthetically pleasing balance and form. The way a character was written gave a message of style. Calligraphy in the Chinese tradition was thus introduced to Japan about 600 AD, known as the Korea tradition. It has been practiced up to today, rejuvenated continuously through contact with Chinese culture. The oldest existing calligraphic text in Japan is the inscription on the halo of the Medicine Buddha statue in the Hiragana temple. This Chinese text was written in Shakitai style, prominent in the Chinese 6 dynasties period. Before the Nara period. The Hiragana temple also holds bibliographic notes on the Lotus Sutra. The Hokjisyu was written early in the 7th century and is considered the oldest Japanese text. It is written in cursive script and illustrates that calligraphy in the Ashoka period was already refined to a high degree. The oldest hand-copied sutra in Japan is the Konga-Jadera Nikya. Copied by the priest Harin in 686 AD, the calligraphy style shows influences from the work of Wang Xizhi. Broken stone in Ush Bridge, and stone in Nasu County are also typical examples from this time. Both inscriptions were influenced by the northern Wira bust style. In the 7th century, the Tang dynasty established hegemony in China. Their second emperor Taizong esteemed Wang Xizhi's calligraphic texts, and this popularity influenced Japanese calligraphers. all of the original texts written by Wang Xizhi have been lost, and copies such as Gaki-ron written by the Empress Kamayo are highly regarded as important sources for Wang Xizhi's style. However, Wang's influence can barely be overstated, in particular for the Weiya style unique to Japan. Even today, there is something about Japanese calligraphy that retains the unchanged flavor of Wang Xizhi's style. Heian period equals. Emperor Kamo moved the capital from Fujiwara in Nara, first to Nagaoka in 784, and then to Heian Kyoto in 794. This marks the beginning of the Heian era, Japan's golden age. Chinese influences in calligraphy were not changed in the early period. For example, under the Emperor Saga's reign, royalty, the aristocracy and even court ladies studied calligraphy by copying Chinese poetry texts in artistic style. Wang Xizhi's influences remain dominant, which are shown in calligraphies written by Kakai or Seika. Some other Chinese calligraphers, such as Wangzun and Yan Zhenqing, were also highly valued. Their most notable admirers were Emperor Saga and Tachibana no Heianari respectively. At the same time, a style of calligraphy unique to Japan emerged. Writing had been popularized, and the kana syllabary was devised to deal with elements of pronunciation that could not be written with the borrowed Chinese characters. Japanese calligraphers still fitted the basic characters, called kanji, into the squares laid out centuries before. Tsuko Shujitsu is considered the first text to show a style unique to Japanese calligraphy. This tanka poem was written in 749 AD, and shows some differences from Chinese calligraphy. Ono no Mikakes, one of the so-called Sansuki, along with Fujiwara no Tsukumasa and Fujiwara no Yukinari, is considered the founder of the authentically Japanese Weiya style, or Weiya Shoda. This development resonated with the court. Kakai said to Emperor Saga, "China is a large country and Japan is relatively small, so I suggest writing in a different way." The Cry for Noble Seika, a poem written by Emperor Saga on the occasion of Seika's death, was one of the examples of such a transformation. Ono no Mikakes served as an archetype for the Sharenin school, which later became the Oi style of calligraphy. The Oi style was later used for official documents in the Edo period and was the prevailing style taught in the Terracotta schools of that time. Kamakura and Muromachi period equals. The ascension of Minamoto Yoritomo to the title of shogun, following the Hagen and Heiji rebellions, and the victory of the Minamoto clan over the Taira, marked the beginning of the Kamakura period, but not quite yet to a return to peace and tranquility. The era is sometimes called the Age of the Warriors, and a broad transition from court influences to a leading role of the military establishment pervaded the culture. It is also, however, a time when exchanges with China of the Song dynasty continued and Buddhism greatly flourished. Zen monks such as Shunju studied in China, and the copybooks that he brought with him are considered highly influential for the Korea tradition of the time, expressing a clear Keshu style. But this was not the only example. Indeed, a succession of Chinese monks was naturalized at that time, encouraged by Regent Hajato Kairi. Rankei Dariya founded the Kencho-ji temple in Kamakura, and many of his works have been preserved. However, with the rise of the Rinzai school of Zen Buddhism, a less technical style appeared, representative of Zen attitudes and exemplified in the works of Musa Soseki, who wrote in a refined Soshu style, or Shahamayacho, the founder of Daitokuji in Kyoto, who had not traveled to China to study. In terms of Weiya style, the works of Fujiwara no Shunsei and Fujiwara no Tika are considered outstanding examples of the late Heian and early Kamakura. Political and military unrest continued throughout the Muromachi period, characterized by tensions between imperial and civil authority and periods of outright civil war. However, as Ashikaga Tokaji had ousted Emperor Go-Daigo from Kyoto to establish his own Bakufu there, the intermingling of residual members of the imperial court, courtiers, daimyo, samurai, and Zen priests resulted in vibrant cultural impulses. The arts prospered, but are not considered as refined as that of earlier times. Of note is the role of Ikyo Za-jun, a successor of Shahamayacho at Daitokuji. Aikyo was instrumental in elevating the appreciation of calligraphy to an integral part of the tea ceremony in the 15th century. Edo period equals. Tokugawa Ieyasu centralized power in his shogunate between 1603 and 1615. This marked the beginning of the Edo period, which brought 250 years of relative stability to Japan, lasting until the second half of the 19th century. The period was marked by an emphasis on the values of the bushi and seclusion from overseas influences with the Sakoku policy. Calligraphic studies were essentially limited to the study of Korea-style works, via Ming Dynasty China. Indigenous developments were contributed by Injin and the Oebaku sect of Zen Buddhism, and the Deshi school of calligraphy. The latter focused on the study of the 8 principles of the character Yong, which go back to Wang Xizhi, and the N72 types of Hissei expounded by Wang Xizhi's teacher, the Lady Wei. The 1664 reprint of a copybook based on these principles in Kyoto contributed an important theoretical development. Calligraphers such as Hosoa Kotaku, who authored the 5-volume Kanga Hyakadon in 1735, further advanced the Korea style. Very characteristic for the early Edo period was an innovation by Honami Kaetsu, who had paper made to order and painted a backdrop of decorative patterns, butterflies or floral elements that his calligraphy established a poetic correspondence with. Together with Kono Nobutada and Shakada Shaja, the 3 Kano Sanpitsu, he is considered one of the greatest calligraphers in the Wei-ya style at the time, creating examples of a uniquely Japanese calligraphy. Around 1736 Yoshimune began relaxing Japan's isolation policy and Chinese cultural imports increased, in particular via the port of Nagasaki. Catalogues of imported copybooks testified to a broad appreciation of Chinese calligraphers among the Japanese literati who pursued the Korea style. Traditionalists studied Wang Xizhi and Wen Zhongming, while reformists modeled their work on the Sosha style of calligraphers such as Zhang Zhu, Hiaisu and Mifu. In terms of Wei-ya, Kono Ihara contributed many fine kana works, but generally speaking, Wei-ya style was not as vigorously practiced as Korea at that time. Nevertheless, some examples have been preserved by scholars of Kokugaku, or poets and painters such as Kaga no Chiyo, Yosa Busan or Sakai Hoitsu. Today calligraphy is an elementary school subject in the Japanese mandatory education system. In high school, calligraphy is one of the choices among art subjects, along with music or painting. It is also a popular high school club activity, particularly with the advent of performance calligraphy. Some universities, such as University of Tsukuba, Tokyo Gakuge University and Fukuoka University of Education, have special departments of calligraphic study that emphasize teacher training programs in calligraphy. Japanese calligraphy has also fascinated many Western artists through the centuries, mainly calligraphers themselves, but famous artists as well, who studied and practiced calligraphy as a parallel to their own art. Connection to Zen Buddhism. Japanese calligraphy was influenced by, and influenced, Zen thought. For any particular piece of paper, the calligrapher has but one chance to create with the brush. The brush strokes cannot be corrected, and even a lack of confidence shows up in the work. The calligrapher must concentrate and be fluid in execution. The brush writes a statement about the calligrapher at a moment in time. Through Zen, Japanese calligraphy absorbed a distinct Japanese aesthetic often symbolized by the ensa or circle of enlightenment. Zen calligraphy is practiced by Buddhist monks and most Shoda practitioners. To write Zen calligraphy with mastery, one must clear one's mind and let the letters flow out of themselves, not practice and make a tremendous effort. This state of mind was called the mushin by the Japanese philosopher Nishida Kaitaro. It is based on the principles of Zen Buddhism, which stresses a connection to the spiritual rather than the physical. Before Japanese tea ceremonies, one is to look at a work of Shoda to clear one's mind. This is considered an essential step in the preparation for a tea ceremony. See also, List of prominent calligraphers, List of national treasures of Japan. Sumi is related in method. Notes. References: Nakata, Yujiro. The Art of Japanese Calligraphy. New York, Tokyo, Wetherell Hayabonsha. ISBN 0-8348-1013-1. History of Japanese Calligraphy, Hashiro Onoue, 1934, Yuko Suzuki, Introduction to Japanese Calligraphy, Search Press, 2005. External links, Shodo Journal Research Institute, Japanese Calligraphy in Zen Spirit, Brush Calligraphy Galleries, Japanese Calligraphy Galleries and more, The History of Japanese Calligraphy in English, at beyondcalligraphy.com, Bridge of Dreams, The Mary Griggs Burke Collection of Japanese Art, a catalogue from the Metropolitan Museum of Art Libraries, which contains material on Japanese calligraphy.